Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Minister, you're aware I'm from a construction background, and I do know what I'm talking about when it comes to construction. Today, Minister, I acknowledge the report of the working group and acknowledge the urgency of getting redress, 100% redress, for the families affected in a speedy fashion, for Mayo, Donegal and the other counties, including Limerick. In Limerick to date, I have cases from the late 80s up to 2006. All of the blocks materials that came into those houses came from outside of County Limerick and not from any quarries that are within Limerick. However, I want to address a separate issue today in relation to pyrite. Recently, I was reading a Surveyors Journal of Ireland, SCSI, that gives an update and industry news. I have a copy of it here with me. And it says, and I quote, "Once a problem is confirmed to be pyrite, a solicitor should be consulted to review the various contracts, guarantees or warranties and insurance in place, and to establish where legal action should be taken to recover the cost for the work from a third party. To date, the courts have generally found that the liability rests with the quarry owners," unquote. Can I ask, has the government tried to get compensation for homeowners where the blocks where they originated? What about the manufacturer's insurance, for example, loss of business insurance or business interruption insurance? Minister, what about the bank's part in this? They assess risk and charge accordingly. Well, hey, Minister, they got this one wrong, didn't they? So, Minister, to give the people 100% redress, you have to go after the insurances of the quarries. You have to go after the insurances of the banks. They charge every householder here big insurance premiums to insure their houses. So you give the 100% redress, but you give the guarantee that you go back after the banks, which the taxpayer in Ireland here bailed out. And it's now time that they pay us back. And I quote again from the journal, Home Bond has taken the view that it is not legally obliged to provide compensation and that liability for major defects only applies when a defect, the result is negligence from a third party or a builder or their subcontractors. Following previous court rulings, Home Bond have said that the quarries are liable under the Liability for Defective Products Act 1991. Now, Minister, this is the shocking part. This was actually printed in 2012. And the government at the time was the Fine Gael-led government, and the Minister for Housing is sitting over there who gives out to you all the time, and he done nothing about it. 2012, Alan Kelly, you sat in your hands with the Fine Gael government, and you done nothing about it. And yet you can sit on the opposition side. Minister, I have full 100% confidence in you to sort out a problem that you've been handed by Fine Gael and Labour. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy O'Donoghue, for your question. And look, I've said it publicly before that I believe those that are responsible should contribute towards remediation and can contribute towards it. And actually, I've engaged the Attorney General intensively on the matter. And he is working on mechanisms to ensure that wrongdoing and liability on the part of quarries and other parties are fully penalised. And actually, if you go back to 2012, and I recognise that report because I was on the heavily involved in that scheme as well, that there was provision in the original Act for payments to be made into the scheme, which I believe Home Bond made €2 million. That was it under the previous scheme. I do intend to, with government colleagues, engage with stakeholders in this. I think to pursue those and identifying those who have been found to have been responsible for this as well. The government, I believe, and again I've said this, are stepping in because we have a moral responsibility. And there's a moral responsibility here, but legally there are others who are responsible. We have to look at the statute of limitations, and again that was something from the original expert report that goes back to previous times. I actually produced a legislation at the time in the Shannon, looking at when the statute of limitations would start. I think there's a bit of work that we're doing on that too, that may start from the day that one receives independent verification of a defect to one's home, that the statute would only kick in from that date, as opposed to when someone believes, who would not be an expert, that there may be a problem. So there are things, Deputy, and you're correct in saying that we can do. We've also engaged a senior engineer, Mr. Ford, to issue a report on the scheme, including in that is identifying and pursuing wrongdoing in this area. We have to learn the lessons of the past too, in relation to standards, and where there are any revisions needed and changes needed to standards and process, I'll be bringing them forward too. There was provision, as I said, for a levy in the 2012 Act. That levy was never undertaken for whatever reason. It didn't happen at that stage. But I'm looking at all options. But those options that I'm looking at will not lead to change what I plan to do with the scheme. I think we've got to pursue that, and I actually said that to homeowners as well, who are very anxious that those who are responsible are pursued. And I intend to do that as best I can legally on behalf of the state. And I certainly will keep you informed of progress in that regard.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy. Thank you, Minister. And you're welcome to Limerick to see the houses that we have issues with. Minister, a question that might actually help you going forward is, how many of these quarries that will be found that they had pyrite in their blocks? How long ago have they stopped making blocks? Have they stopped making blocks? So the liability, if this report was done in 2012, and they knew they had an issue then, have those quarries still been making blocks? And have they added to this, which would make them liable then, that this was here? The other thing I have for you is that insurance, for people that have pyrite in their house, going forward, they cannot be liable for excessive insurance policies on their houses. We have to make sure that this doesn't happen. And when the 100% redress comes, building regulations are there for a reason. And if you have an insurance claim on your house today, your house has to be returned to the regulation of today, not the regulation of 20 years ago or 30 years ago. The building standards are your house has to be returned to the existing regulations which stand now. Thank you.
Yeah. Look, again, thank you, Deputy. There's issues around insurance, certainly. There's issues around certification. When work is done, it should be certified. And should be certified that the work is done to a standard that one can claim and get insurance again. In the original scheme that was brought forward, that wasn't actually allowed for. We've made progress in that space. I intend to bring that forward as one of my recommendations. And that's why when I answered Deputy McLaughlin earlier, that I do intend also as part of it that one of my proposals would be allowing recourse to the scheme a second time, should that be required. Now, thankfully, I've seen with the pyrite and the infill that we haven't had to have work redone in that space. But I have also met residents that unfortunately have only seen problems occur with homes in Clare and in Dublin 30 years after the homes have been built. 30 years, and Limerick indeed, which I will be visiting too, Deputy, and I will let you know we have a submission there. So there's a lot of work to do in this space. We've done a lot of work there too. But once the revised scheme is published, there will be more work after that also around standards and how we can help people as best we can. But recourse is really important. Those who are responsible, in my view, should be held accountable. Thank you very much.